All right, panelists, we are now live on Zoom. Welcome, welcome, welcome to folks at home. Welcome to our panelists, Dan Grazier, Tamara Lawrence. It's so wonderful to have you both here. We're at the event, Why Canada Shouldn't Buy the F-35, Harms and Risks. Welcome to everyone at home. It's lovely to see you joining us. We are so excited to hear from our esteemed guests who have been thinking and writing about these issues and these warplanes for a very long time. We're here with retired Captain Dan Grazier and Tamara Lawrence. And we are both live on Zoom, and we're also live to the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute's Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Canada Policy. So you can share this event with your friends there. You can also find out more about the host organizations of today's events, the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute at foreignpolicy.ca, as well as WILPF Canada, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, at wilpfcanada.ca. So you can see lots of folks are joining us. It's so exciting to see all of you, Celeste and Corey, Craig, Brendan, hello. We are here, as I said, for those who've just joined for the event, Why Canada Shouldn't Buy the F-35. And we'll be talking today about the harms and the risks of this particular fighter jet. So my name is Bianca Bajeni. I am with the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute. And I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the island of Montreal, or Tiohtià:ke, which is situated on the traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka people. And the keepers of the eastern door of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy as well. I also want to acknowledge our co-hosting organization, WILPF Canada, who you'll hear a little bit more about from Tamara later on tonight. And I want to let you all know that the chat is open. Folks have already started saying hi. Hi, Cindy. Hi, Elizabeth. So you can let us know where you're tuning in from. It's so great to hear from people at home. We'll be posting a map in the chat in a second, so that if you don't know your traditional territory, you can actually take a look and post it in our chat. So, as always, just please keep your comments civil and free from harmful commentary. I also want to let you know that after our speakers give their opening presentations, you'll have a chance to ask questions. And so please do post your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can, time permitting. So again, I'm with the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute, which is an organization that challenges unjust foreign policy measures and aims to bridge the gap between the perception and the reality of Canada's role in the world. And we also work to oppose the racism that's embedded in Canadian foreign policy. So find out more about us at foreignpolicy.ca. We're an organization that's very reliant on our community to keep going and keep doing this work. So please do consider donating or becoming a sustainer at foreignpolicy.ca/donation. All right, and so now for tonight's event, which I have been looking forward to for a long time. We have been, as the CFPI, as WILPF, very happy to support the No Fighter Jet campaign, which has been very, very active over the last little while, and has been opposing the planned purchase of 88 new warplanes, which have a staggering sticker price of $19 billion, actually $77 billion over their entire life cycle. And there has been much opposition from multiple days of action to more than 100 activists fasting against the jets in the summer. CFPI and the Voice of Women instigated a public letter that was addressed to the Prime Minister opposing this purchase, that was signed by more than 100 musicians, politicians, authors, and academics, including Canadian musicians like Neil Young and Sarah Harmer, authors like Michael Ondaatje, environmentalists like David Suzuki and Naomi Klein, as well as 2 sitting MPs, 4 former MPs, and state senator, diplomat Stephen Lewis, as well as international figures like Roger Waters, Daryl Hannah, and Professor Noam Chomsky. So this letter criticized the ecological impacts of the fighter jets, as well as the diversion of resources away from more pressing social needs. And it also criticized the terrible harms that have already been caused by the use of fighter jets to bomb other countries, mainly in the global south. So, the fighter jet coalition, CFPI, we strongly believe that we don't need these fighter jets. Canada's Five Eyes counterparts, New Zealand, North America trade partner, Mexico, European ally, Ireland, for instance, they don't have operational fighter jets. But the Liberals have organized this procurement in such a way that all but guarantees now that the F-35 is going to be chosen, very likely to be chosen. And yet the Liberals' election platform claimed we will not buy the F-35 stealth fighter bomber. So now Trudeau's Liberals, who had opposed this, are actually moving towards acquiring 33% more F-35s than even Stephen Harper's Conservatives had planned to purchase. So it's important that we continue to challenge this purchase, and we're encouraging Canadians specifically to sign the Parliamentary Petition E3821 to let members of Parliament know that they're opposed to the purchase of these this new combat aircraft. It's petition 3821, and we'll be posting details about how to sign this in the chat as well. And you can also find a wealth of information about the No Fighter Jets campaign and the No Fighter Jet Coalition at nofighterjets.ca. And there's actions you can take, as well as articles, analysis, and more. And so with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the evening, Tamara Lawrence. Tamara Lawrence is a researcher and member with the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom Canada, or WILPF. She just published the report Soaring, which we'll hear more about today, the harms and risks of fighter jets and why Canada must not buy a new fleet. Tamara is also a fellow with the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute. She's a PhD candidate in global governance at the Balsillie School for International Affairs at Wilfrid Laurier University. She has a master's degree in international politics and security studies from the University of Bradford, as well as a law degree and MBA from Dalhousie. And her research is very much focused on the climate and environmental impacts of the military. Tamara is also a member of the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace. Welcome, Tamara.
Thank you so much, Bianca. Good evening, everyone. It's really nice to be with you all. It's so great that CFPI could be co-hosting this webinar with the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. WILPF Canada is a national affiliate of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom International, which is based in Geneva, Switzerland. And WILPF is the world's oldest feminist peace organization. It was founded by a group of women in 1915 as they gathered at The Hague to try to stop the First World War. And ever since, women have continued to gather to try to stop war and militarism and promote peace, disarmament, and nonviolence. WILPF Canada is very pleased that yesterday we released our new report called Soaring, the Harms and Risks of Fighter Jets. This report is available on our website, and along with the report, we have a two-page summary in French and a two-page summary in English. These documents are on our website, wilpfcanada.ca, and as well as the report and these summaries, we also have a two-page fact sheet on Canadian military spending and Canadian military emissions, and we encourage you to check out all of these documents and to share them. So before I discuss this new report, I would like to do an land acknowledgement as well. And I want you to not only listen to what I'm saying, I want you to try to feel it. So I'm speaking to you tonight from Waterloo, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral peoples. For Indigenous people, the land is sacred. It is the land that shapes their identity and their community. It sustains their traditional livelihoods, ceremonial practices, language, and culture. Yet since the end of the Second World War, the Canadian government has increasingly dispossessed and displaced Indigenous people from their land to establish Army bases, Air Force bases, naval dockyards, military installations, radar systems, weapon ranges, and very few Canadians know the extent of this troubled history. Across this country, Indigenous territory is heavily militarized. It's fenced off, bombed, torpedoed, strafed, flared, shot at, crushed by tanks, poisoned by chemical weapons, heavily damaged and contaminated from weapons testing. Our military and our militarism is gravely harming Indigenous people and their land in this country, and our military and militarism is harming people and their land in other countries. And if Canada buys a new fleet of fighter jets, this harm is going to continue. So let's talk a little bit about Canada's fighter jet procurement. It is one of the most expensive and consequential procurements in Canadian history. In 1997, the Liberal government under Jean Chrétien signed a memorandum of understanding with the United States and 6 other international partners, including the United Kingdom and Australia, to jointly develop a new advanced fighter jet. And this is Lockheed Martin's F-35. And this development consortium would allow Canadian companies to bid and to supply parts and components for this warplane. So over the past 20 years, Canada has made contributions to this development consortium upwards of $1 billion, even though we haven't signed a contract to buy the plane. Then a decade later, in 2010, the Conservative government under Prime Minister Stephen Harper announced that Canada would buy 65 fighter jets in a $9 billion sole source contract. Now, this violated federal procurement rules that required an open competition. And this decision caused a huge backlash from opposition parties and from the public to such an extent that the Conservatives could not go through with the deal and they had to put it on hold. Then, during the 2015 federal election, the Liberal leader, Justin Trudeau, said that if the Liberals win the election, his government would not buy the F-35. And at a campaign rally, Trudeau called the F-35 unaffordable and a nightmare. But he did promise that the Liberals would hold an open competition to replace Canada's aging fleet of CF-18s. And then 4 years later, in 2019, the Liberal government launched this open competition. And as Bianca said, it's 88 fighter jets for $19 billion. And then in June of 2020, the weapons companies submitted their bids. And right now, the federal government is evaluating 2 bids, one from Lockheed Martin for the F-35, no surprise there, and the other for the Gripen multi-role fighter jet by Saab, a Swedish company. Now, because the United States is our closest defense partner, and because Canada is a member of NORAD and NATO, and because the United States has to certify what fighter jet Canada buys, all the defense analysts are expecting that Canada is going to choose the F-35, and the decision will be made sometime this year. Now, I'm going to let Dan explain to you why the F-35 continues to be unaffordable and continues to be a nightmare and why Canada shouldn't buy it. But I want to say a little bit more about the competition for these new fighter jets. The Liberal government promised an open and transparent competition, but that's not been the case. The government has actually released very little information. It has only said that the fighter jets are going to be evaluated on 3 criteria: on capability, cost, and on economic benefits. This is jobs, but it has not made any of this information public. And worse, the opposition parties are not asking any critical questions about this procurement. The other thing is the Trudeau government has not conducted or publicized a full life cycle cost analysis, an environmental assessment, a plan to achieve net zero emissions, a public health study, a gender-based analysis, or held consultations with Indigenous communities to ensure free, prior, and informed consent about this procurement. Now, all of these things are required under policies and laws that the federal government is supposed to follow. Last year, our organizations, we wrote to the Senate Committee on National Defense, and we wrote to the Standing Committee on National Defense to investigate our concerns and to explore these issues about the fighter jet procurement, but they never replied to our letters. So over the past year, I have been trying to gather this information, and I have put it together in this new report called Soaring: The Harms and Risks of Fighter Jets and Why Canada Must Not Buy a New Fleet. And a special focus of this report is on the negative impacts of fighter jets and Air Force bases on Indigenous peoples in Canada. And I want to tell you a little bit about that. So as part of the investigation and the research for this report, last August, I went to Alberta and I drove 3.5 hours northeast of Edmonton, and I went to the Canadian Forces Base Cold Lake. This is where Canada's largest and busiest Air Force base is. Most Canadians don't know that in 1952, without consent from the Dene and Cree peoples, the federal government took 3 million acres to establish an Air Force base and the Cold Lake Air Weapons Range. And the loss of this land severely devastated and impoverished the Indigenous people there. While I was in Cold Lake last summer, I met with members of the Cold Lake First Nation. The fighter jets flew overhead throughout the day. And one morning when I was meeting with a Dene elder at her home, a fighter jet, this is at 9 o'clock in the morning, flew low over her house, and we had to stop talking and wait for the fighter jet to pass. And she said to me, "This is why I'm going deaf." And she pointed to her hearing aids. And I asked her and the other members of the Cold Lake First Nation if they knew about the new fleet of fighter jets potentially coming to the Air Force Base, if they knew about this procurement, and if they knew about the F-35, and they didn't. And I said to them that if Canada buys the F-35, it will be even louder than Canada's current fleet of CF-18s. And she told me she didn't know anything about this. Now, I told her as well that in the United States, in Burlington, Vermont, where some of the F-35s are stationed, that there are some houses in the flight path near the Air Force Base that are deemed unlivable, and the federal government, the U.S. government, has had to buy these homes because it is so noisy. And there has been, a lot of complaints about the F-35s now being in that community, and that some of that research is in the report. And this Dene elder who I was speaking with that morning, she's also a water keeper, and she has told me that she has witnessed fighter jets dropping fuel on the lakes and on the forest around the reserves. Every spring, the Cold Lake Air Force Base hosts a fighter jet training with NATO allies and other international partners, and it's called Exercise Maple Leaf. All of this fighter jet training, military activities has caused widespread contamination. Almost every single wing in this country is contaminated with PFAS, forever chemicals. And in Cold Lake, because of the air weapons range, there has been a precipitous decline in the boreal caribou herd, which is culturally significant for the Indigenous people there. Another area in Canada where fighter jets train is Goose Bay in Labrador. And I have been in touch with some of the Shishiachu Innu First Nations people there. In 1979, the Canadian government and NATO took 22 million acres of land for fighter jet training. And in the past, there have been about 8,000 flights a year over this territory. And Goose Bay, like Cold Lake, is deemed an ultra low flight training area. So these fighter jets are able to fly 30 meters or 100 feet in the air, right over the homes, right over the forests. The Canadian government now markets Goose Bay and Labrador as a foreign military training area. And last month, the German military arrived to start their winter training. 3 years ago, one of the Innu elders and land defenders, Chakuesh Panashwe, published her memoir, I Keep the Land Alive. And this is what she wrote. The fighter jets shatter our happiness. They have no respect. Sometimes they come in the morning when the children and old people are still asleep in their tents. The little ones cry because they don't understand what that terrifying sound is, the sonic boom. It's so loud, it hurts our ears, and we worry the damage might be permanent. If Canada buys the F-35, it's going to become even louder in Labrador. And I want you to know that Chakuesh supports our campaign to stop the federal government from buying new fighter jets. Fighter jets are also regularly flying up north to Iqaluit to train. This is Canada's most northerly city. It's the capital of Nunavut, and it's the territory of the Inuit. A few months ago, Canadian and American fighter jets were practicing Arctic maneuvers, and they were practicing air-to-air refueling. So imagine this, in a fragile ecosystem, which is the fastest warming area in Canada, fossil fuel powered fighter jets, are practicing passing fuel and being refueled by tankers. And this is further endangering the Arctic and exacerbating climate change. If Canada buys a new fleet of fighter jets, it is going to lock in fossil fuel powered militarism for the next 5 decades. And there is no evidence that the Trudeau government is examining these risks and harms to the natural environment, to the climate, and to Indigenous people, to the Arctic, to the boreal forest, and to the climate. And so these are some of the things that I discuss in the new report, and I hope you will read it. Now, just before I turn it over to Dan, I want to say that we are sending this report to every member of the Senate Committee on National Defense and every member of the Standing Committee on National Defense. And we are asking the MPs and the senators to do their job and to publicly access this procurement. I also want to mention that in the report, I rely on and I use some of Dan's excellent analysis and his articles. And I want to bring to your attention, and I'll put this in the chat, one of his especially important articles, which he wrote, called F-35 and the Captured State, which discusses the power and influence of Lockheed Martin, the world's largest weapons manufacturer, on defense procurement in the United States and on the US government. Lockheed Martin exerts the same kind of influence and power in Canada. Lockheed Martin has billions of dollars of contracts in this country. It has 8 offices across Canada, and it is pressuring the federal government right now. If you look at the lobbying database to buy the F-35, we can't let them buy the F-35. We are going to need you to get engaged. Please check out the report and share it with your member of parliament. And I look forward now to hearing from Dan.
Thank you so much, Tamara. Thank you. Thank you for your, as always, very passionate and very clear presentation. And thank you so much for the work that you've been doing ongoing and your leadership in challenging this fighter jet purchase. So there are about 120 of us on this call, which is wonderful. And so I want to let you all know that Tamara will be joining us a little bit later for the Q&A that's coming up after Dan speaks. And so I just want to remind folks at home that if you do have questions for our speakers, please do post them in the chat. So our next panelist of the evening is Captain Dan Grazier. Dan Grazier is a defense expert and fellow with the Project on Government Oversight. Dan is a retired Marine Corps captain. Prior to his time in the Marine Corps, he worked as a television journalist covering stories ranging from breaking news to long-form investigative pieces. He's written extensively and lectured on matters of military reform and maneuver warfare. he makes an average of 100 appearances in a variety of media outlets, from Fox News to the Washington Times, discussing matters of military reform. He's also a graduate of the Marine Corps Expeditionary Warfare School and holds a Master of Arts in Military History from Norwich University. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you very much, Bianca, and thank you, Tamara, for the lovely introductions. It's a pleasure to be here and to speak to you about these important matters. Always nice to talk to my northern cousins. So I am going to start with a little bit of a disclaimer. I only reluctantly mildly contradict my co-host here, I guess. So what I'm not going to do here today is I'm not going to tell Canadian officials or Canadians in general what they should or shouldn't do. I think the last thing that you need, and I'm positive it's the last thing that you want, is a foreigner, especially an American, telling you or lecturing you about what's in your best national security interests. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to provide you information based on years of research about the F-35. I'm going to provide you a lot of information that I know is not in the glossy promotional brochures that are produced by Lockheed Martin or included in the slick sales pitches of people who are paid either directly or indirectly by Lockheed Martin as they try to convince governments around the world to buy the F-35. So let me give you a little bit of background about myself, just to place things in the proper context. So I, as Bianca said, I served in the Marine Corps for 10 years. I was a tank officer in the Marine Corps. I'm not a pilot. I've never flown a plane. So I'm not here to teach anyone how to fly or anything like that, because I'm absolutely not qualified to do so. My experience in the Marine Corps, and particularly my experience in tanks, did give me a lot of knowledge and insight about big, expensive military machines and what it takes to operate them. Now, while my machines only rarely left the ground, which were always occurrences that never failed to give my maintenance crews heartburn, my experience in tanks taught me a great deal about needless complexity and how that will affect military operations. Let me give you a little bit of background about the organization that where I work. I work for the Project on Government Oversight. We are a good government watchdog organization. We were founded in 1981 by a group of Pentagon whistleblowers who were concerned by what they observed, the reckless spending, a lot of poor decisions about the kind of weapons that the United States was buying, that were just not getting the kind of attention that they thought these important matters deserved. And so they banded together with some funders to fund our organization. Was originally called the Project for Military Procurement, and we've been carrying on that work ever since. So all the information that I'm going to provide you today is documented in unclassified sources. And what I do is I compile that information, I discuss it with subject matter experts with firsthand experience working, in this case, with the F-35. I work to place it in the proper context and then present it in a way that's accessible to the public. So I think I want everyone to remember that I am the public face of a group of people who are skeptical about the F-35, and for their own personal protection, they can't speak publicly because the government can go after them, take their jobs, security clearances, and those kind of things. But I no longer work for the government, so they don't have that kind of leverage over me. So it's my job to advocate to the public on their behalf. Now, what we do is we look for systemic problems in weapons acquisitions when we do this kind of work. So what I'm looking at when I look at the F-35 is I'm looking for those big underlying systemic problems that lead to ineffective designs that are often ridiculously expensive. So I take that information and I put it together so that we can influence policymakers, so they can work to fix some of those systemic problems, and also to educate the public so the public can exert pressure on their elected officials to work to fix some of these problems. Now, it's a big uphill battle. to do that because there is a lot of really negative incentives built into the system to continue carrying on with business as usual, to keep making these same mistakes over and over again. And what we found with the F-35 program is it is the apotheosis really of all of these systemic problems. So all these issues and processes that have been put in place really since the end of World War II have grown and developed, in order to really grease the skids to more easily move taxpayer dollars from the Treasury into the coffers of the defense industry. All those lessons were learned about how to do that well, and they were applied tenfold in the F-35 program, which is why we have all the problems that we see today. So with that, all that being said, let's get into it, and let's get into some of the background of the F-35 program. So the F-35, because that plays a key role, you have to understand the history of the program and where it came from to understand why it's such a problem today. So the F-35 program began in 1983, and it began as a really straightforward replacement program for the United States Marine Corps' AV-8B Harrier. That's the jump jet that was first built by the United Kingdom. It can take off and land vertically, so it can operate from small ships. That was the very first acquisition program that was led by the United States Marine Corps. Back in the 1980s, it actually gave the Marine Corps its taste for the power and influence that's involved with managing a budget and running one of these acquisition programs, which has been a big problem for the Marine Corps really ever since. So we had that program that was started in 1983, and in the same time period in the 1980s, there were several aircraft programs that were started by the Air Force and the Navy to build follow-on aircraft to really iconic ones like the F-15 and the F-16 and even the F-18. So a lot of work was done on those programs, but not a lot came from them. So a lot of them were kind of canceled in the 1980s, and really all of them were canceled after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. So then not too long after that, a lot of the concepts that were developed in those programs were merged into the Harrier replacement program, because that was a program that continued on the whole time. And since it was approved, it survived. And so the decision was made to merge all of these programs into one. And then that eventually became the Joint Strike Fighter program. Now, just to put that in the proper time concept or context. So I'm 44 years old right now. In 1994, I was a sophomore in high school, and my favorite band was the Crash Test Dummies. So here we are, all these years later, nearly 30 years later, and we still have an F-35 program that has that remains little more than a really expensive prototype aircraft. So this new program that was merged in 1994 and renamed the Joint Strike Fighter program in 1996 was created to build a common airframe to perform multiple missions that met the needs of 3 American services. And then later on, somebody got the bright idea somewhere in the Pentagon, somewhere in the defense industry, to create a built-in customer base, foreign customer base for the F-35 program. And so a group of international partners, to include Canada, were invited to participate in the development of the F-35 program. Now that was a first. So the United States obviously sells aircraft and all kinds of weapons all over the world. But to my knowledge and from my research, the F-35 program was the first one that was designed as part of an international coalition. Now that creates some problems, because what you have is you have a lot of influences designing this one aircraft. So what it is, it's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So it's a lot of cooks that are all working to make the same stew, and they're all adding their own ingredients. And you can imagine if some of them aren't necessarily working well together, that stew is not going to taste very good. And that's really a big source of the problems with the F-35 today. So let me talk a little bit about. Let me break this down just a little bit. So the the idea of building a common airframe for 3 different services is flawed because the 3 different American services, in this case, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, and the Navy, they all have different needs from their aircraft. And so when you try to incorporate all these different needs into one airframe, you end up trimming the performance envelope on the margins. So for the aircraft variant, we'll start with that one. Really, that should be a relatively lightweight, it should be, when you're talking about fighter aircraft, that should be a relatively lightweight aircraft. But to meet the needs of the Marine Corps with their vertical takeoff and landing requirement, that meant that you needed a wider aircraft to fit the bigger engine to make that work. Now, because it's a common airframe, what that did was it made the Air Force version, and it's the F-35A that Canada is considered buying, it made it bigger, and it actually added 2,000 pounds of just dead weight in the middle of the aircraft to keep it balanced, just to make up for the space where the larger engine for the Marine Corps variant would go. So that's a big problem. And really the idea of commonality that they had to reduce costs for the overall program ended up being a fallacy because the excess complexity that was involved in fitting all the needs of the 3 different services in added extra costs instead of reducing them. And the level of commonality never ended up where it was supposed to. So now the next problem is the multiple role challenge, the multiple mission challenges involved in aircraft. So aircraft that are specifically designed for specific missions have very different requirements. So for a fighter aircraft, you want something that's really light and nimble, that can maneuver very well in the air. For a strike aircraft, one that can fly deep into enemy territory, you need something a little bigger to carry the necessary ordnance, to carry the necessary fuel. So you're going to have a bigger aircraft to be able to do that. Also, for a stealth aircraft, you have all that complexity. For an interceptor, you need something that flies really high and flies really fast. So you have those challenges as well. And when you try incorporating all of those different capabilities into one airframe, what you end up, you're trying to build an aircraft that can be all things to all people. And what you end up with is the proverbial jack of all trades, master of none. And that is what the F-35 really is. And so in addition to the problems, the performance problems that go along with that, that also adds a lot of cost, and it makes the aircraft very, very expensive. Now, this is a lesson that we've learned in the past. So there are often fads in defense acquisition matters. And so one of those fads is this multi-role aircraft idea. And it was tried before in the 1960s. It was a Robert McNamara idea. He wondered why we were building all these different aircraft for the different services. And so he ordered the Pentagon to design one aircraft to meet the needs of all the services. And that was the F-111. And that was a really large aircraft that had another fad in acquisitions, was the variable wing geometry. So it's the big swing wing designs. You saw Top Gun. The F-14 is another aircraft that has that design. That swing wing adds a lot of weight and adds a lot of needless complexity to the design. Now the F-111 was eventually fielded by just the Air Force, so the Navy and the Marine Corps backed out of it at their earliest opportunity, and the Navy went with the F-14. That's when the F-14 came around. But before too long, people in the Pentagon realized that the F-111 was really a disaster, and so they started looking for alternatives. And the leaders of the Pentagon actually demonstrated that they were able to learn lessons and apply them properly, because out of the disaster of the F-111, we actually got really good aircraft, because it was out of that we got the F-15, the F-16, the F-18, and the A-10. And those were all purpose-built aircraft, and they all work very well, which is one of the reasons why they're all still flying today, because they all demonstrate a truism, in that you can set out to build an aircraft. You can take an aircraft that was built for a very specific purpose, and then you can adapt it later to perform other roles. but when you set out to build an aircraft to perform multiple roles from the beginning, you end up with a turkey, which is why we have the F-35 today. So another big problem with this was with the F-35 program, the best acquisition practices were ignored. So one of the things that will guarantee you to have a disaster is to not fly before you buy. And what I mean by that is when the services decide that they need a new weapon system, in this case, an aircraft, the services will go through a multi-step process to look to see if there are potential non-acquisition alternatives. And if that fails, then they will draw up a list of requirements to figure out exactly what they need, and they'll build a request for proposal, and then they'll shop that around the defense industry. And then again, best practices, that request for proposal will result in production representative prototypes that are then delivered to the services, and actual fighter pilots will fly both of those aircraft, and they will determine which design is best. And then because you have a largely fully designed prototype, the winner of that will then be able to go essentially right into production. Now that was ignored with the F-35 program. So we had a sham fly-off. So Lockheed Martin was actually involved in some of the early concept development for what was then called the Joint Strike Fighter program. So they had a leg up. They kind of knew what was coming. And so when somebody pointed out that, look, federal acquisition regulations require us to do a fly-off, then the Pentagon shopped around this request for proposal. And so Boeing submitted a design. And if you think that that process was not rigged, I challenge you to do a Google image search of the Boeing X-32. Just look at the picture of it and tell me that the whole process was not rigged, because the X-32 is a ridiculous looking aircraft. And so it came as no surprise to anyone when Lockheed Martin won the development contract on October 26, 2001. Now, that program could not go, that the prototype that was used in the fly-off was not a fully developed aircraft. It was just a technology demonstrator, just to prove that the design could meet really the Marine Corps' requirements to take off and land vertically. So all the things that would make it an effective fighter plane had yet to be developed, and that process continues today. So here we are, more than 20 years after that contract had been awarded, and the program is still in development. Whereas the program that was done well, the lightweight fighter program, which produced the F-16 and then later the F-18, the prototypes that were flown in 1972, if I remember correctly, those were both combat aircraft. Both of those prototypes could have been used in combat. And so when the contracts were awarded after the winner had been declared, it went into production within 3 years. And most of that 3 years was spent, some of it was spent fiddling with the design, but a lot of it was just used to flesh out the manufacturing process for it and to build that production capacity. So there's a very big difference between how the process with the lightweight fighter was done and the way the F-35 program was done. So now another big problem that we're dealing with now, and this comes from another fad in defense acquisitions. So from the very beginning, the F-35 has been specifically designed to be a big moneymaker for Lockheed Martin. And I'm not just talking in production. Where Lockheed Martin is going to make the bulk of their money on the F-35 program is in the long-term sustainment contracts. And again, the aircraft is designed from the beginning to require Lockheed Martin to be the sole source for that sustainment. You know, the concept that was used, it was, again, this was a fad back in the early 2000s, was called total system performance responsibility. And what that, and the idea behind that was that private business can always do things better than the government can. And so the Pentagon leaders of the day, they decided that, look, we're gonna have whoever wins this competition, they're going to be the ones that are actually going to do the bulk of the maintenance on this, because private business is always more efficient than the government is. Now, in a lot of cases, that is true. But when you're talking about military equipment, specifically military equipment that has to deploy overseas and and is operated by uniformed service personnel, that's not necessarily the case. You want systems that can be maintained by uniformed service members that are right there with you. And that is not the case with the F-35. So the F-35 requires an army of civilian contractors to do work on the F-35, because uniformed service members can't. And they can't because Lockheed Martin retains the data rights for the program. So, and that's a huge problem that will likely never get solved, because the original development contract did not require Lockheed Martin to hand the data rights to the F-35 over to the government. It was not included in the contract. And for the government to acquire the data rights would require a huge amount of money paid to Lockheed Martin, far more than the government is willing to pay. And so they are, and that feeds right back into that piece that I wrote about the F-35 in the captured state, is where I detail this idea. The U.S. government and every government that will operate the F-35 has no choice but to work with Lockheed Martin and to pay Lockheed Martin a lot of money every year in order to maintain their fleets. So now, at the same time, when the contract was awarded, there were lots of gleeful announcements about where the F-35 was going to be built. And we call that political engineering. And now the idea behind this is that you spread contracts all over the country to build up as much political support as possible. And to see how extensive this is in the F-35 program, you can go to a website, F35.com. It's owned and operated by Lockheed Martin. You can go up to the tabs. I think it's under About. You can scroll down to the Economic Impact page, and you'll pull up an interactive map where you can roll your cursor over each U.S. state, and the website will show you, a little pop-up will show you how many suppliers and how many jobs are in each state supporting the F-35 program. When you do the count, the F-35 is built in 48 U.S. states, which means that there are 96 United States senators that have a vested political interest in the F-35 program. And we estimate, it's really difficult to count, but the F-35 is built in approximately 350 congressional districts, which means there are 350 about United States representatives that have a vested political interest in the F-35 program. And in many cases, they have a vested financial interest in it as well, because they receive a lot of campaign contributions from Lockheed Martin and other defense contractors. So that's a lot of automatic political support for the program. And if you think that might not be that big of an issue, let me tell you a little quick story from my own personal experience. In 2015, I was up on Capitol Hill and I was meeting with the Chief of Staff of a United States Senator. And we were talking about comparative testing between the F-35 and the A-10. It was something that the Air Force and the Joint Program Office was fighting, and we were trying to build support for that. And so I was sitting down and we were talking about this with the Chief of Staff, the Chief Senator, and the Chief of Staff stopped me mid-sentence as I was going through our pitch, and he said, "Look, we're happy to work with you on the comparative testing, but we really have to frame this in a way that doesn't make it look like we're against the F-35, because the F-35 is worth 1,000 jobs to us. Not because the F-35 was an effective aircraft, but because the F-35 was worth 1,000 jobs in their state." So political engineering does work. I've heard a number of comments like that in my years of doing this work. So, but political engineering causes more problems than just the fact that you have a lot of lawmakers who are unwilling to speak out against the program, and even fewer who are willing to actually cast a vote against it. So in order to have those subcontracts to spread all over the country, you need to design extra gadgets in order to have those subcontracts. So what that does is that incentivizes excess complexity in the design of these weapons. And now in the F-35, you're talking about all those different subcontracts. That's a lot of gadgets. Now, each one of those gadgets that you add to the design is one more thing that can break. And that's going to reduce your readiness rates, which means that you have an overall less effective weapon program. And so, and to illustrate that, let me cite a couple of figures for you. So the best measure to gain a good picture of the readiness of an aircraft system is the full mission capable rate. Now that is the percentage of aircraft in a unit that is capable of performing all of its assigned missions. Now this is particularly a relevant metric for the F-35 program because it is a multi-role aircraft. So it's supposed to perform multiple roles. And so the full mission capable rate is even more important for for the F-35 than other more narrowly focused aircraft. We'll say it. So now the Pentagon and Pentagon leaders and industry leaders, they try to they actively try to hide the full mission capable rates of the F-35 program. They certainly don't like to talk about them. They prefer to talk about the mission capable rate or even the aircraft availability rate, which are easier to calculate and provide better looking numbers for them. But based on the most recent numbers that we have, they were published by the Government Accountability Office. The average fleet-wide, so of all three variants, full mission capable rate for the F-35 program is approximately 39%. Now, when you break that down by the different variants, it is a 54% full mission capable rate for the F-35A, which is what you're talking about in Canada, which sounds all right, 54%. But for a truly effective aircraft program, the full mission capable rate should be 80%. So 54% is well below that. Now it gets worse for the other variants, and this is much more applicable to an American audience. For the Marine Corps F-35B, the vertical takeoff and landing, or the short takeoff and landing variant for the Marine Corps, the number is 15.1%. And for the F-35C, the aircraft carrier variant that the Navy flies, the full mission capable rate is a staggering 6.8%. Again, an effective aircraft program will be at 80%. Now, that has huge effects, but let's just focus on one. Let's talk about pilot skills. This is very important. So when an aircraft cannot operate as often as it needs to, it means that pilots have reduced flying hours. And so that is a huge problem. So an aircraft is only as good as the pilot flying it. And if that pilot can't get enough flying hours, they can't develop their skills and they can't become better at what they do. And if those flying hours drop low enough, then their skills actually degrade. So that has an obvious impact on combat skills, but it can also affect safety. Now, some F-35 program advocates, lots of them actually, they say that all of this can be mitigated with extra simulator training because they now have the capabilities to build hyper-realistic simulators that are just like the real thing. Now, for that, I'm going to say, and please pardon my language, is bullshit. So one of the reasons why the F-35 program today remains an unproven, very expensive prototype is because it cannot complete the final step involved in the testing process. It's a process called initial operational test and evaluation. Now, the program hasn't been able to do that because the fancy simulator that they need in order to test the highest end capabilities, the capabilities for which we are paying a premium for the F-35, because they can't test them in the real world because the test ranges just can't support that level of testing, needs to be done in a simulator. Now, the Navy has the lead on building the simulator. The facility is down at Pax River, Patuxent River Naval Air Station in Maryland. that program started in 2015, and we're now in 2022, and that simulator still has not been built. And according to people who are very heavily involved in that whole process, it is still a long way away from being completed. And some of them believe that it will never be completed up to the level that they need in order to finish that testing. Now, to help illustrate this point and to kind of prove 2 points with one example, let me talk about the F-35 helmet, because this has drawn a lot of attention over the years. So the F-35 helmet is, again, it's a good demonstration of excess complexity, and it also shows how it can impact safety. So the F-35 helmet, it's part of the distributed aperture system on the F-35. So this is a capability that's often hyped, that allows the pilot to see through the aircraft, because there are a series of 6 cameras placed on the exterior of the aircraft that pumps video into the visor that goes down in front of the pilot's face. The helmet itself costs $400,000 approximately, and which just by itself is ridiculous. But let's think about this in a more fundamental way. But just think about the problem that helmet is designed to solve. So for a long time, we've known that for a pilot to be really effective, for a fighter pilot in particular to be really effective, they need to be able to see what's going on outside their aircraft. You know, because the fighter pilot that sees his enemy first is much more likely to win that fight. And so now earlier aircraft like the F-16, and even before that, like the F-86, solved that problem by having the pilot sit very high up in the fuselage and to give them a big bubble canopy, an unobstructed canopy, which is basically all glass, to allow them to look all around them to get a good view of what's going on outside of their aircraft. Now in the F-35, the pilot sits down low inside, kind of deep inside the fuselage, and most of his vision is out front. Now they created this distributed aperture system with all these cameras in order to, pump video in to give the pilot that situational awareness outside of his aircraft. Now there's a video that you can find if you really, really look for it, where you have an F-35 pilot that's talking about his helmet. And he even says that, look, if I want to, it's kind of a neat feature to be able to see that imagery in my visor. But if I want to look outside the aircraft, then I'm just going to roll it over on its side. If I want to see below me, I'm just going to roll it on its side. I'm just going to look down with my own eyeballs, because no matter what we do, there is no better visual device ever created than the human eyeball. And so, but what this did with this, with this helmet, it created, the helmet is built in one place, and then the pilots each pilot has to go to a special lab in Oregon to spend 2 days getting their helmet aligned properly to their head and their eyeballs. So, so it creates, lots of opportunities for subcontracts to be spread around. So now, let me talk about how that impacts safety. So what I have right here, this is a copy of an accident report for an F-35A that crashed at Eglin Air Force Base down in Florida on May 19th, 2020. So in this case, the pilot was coming into land at Eglin, and if anybody's been down in that part of Florida, it's out in kind of the swampy area on the Panhandle, and at night it gets really, really dark down there. And so this pilot was coming in for a landing at night, and he found that his helmet was misaligned. So the visual cues pointing him to where he was trying to land were actually sending him off course. So he kind of realized that, and he was trying to adjust for this misaligned helmet, but he came in at kind of a bad angle. Now, in addition to that, the glow that's formed by the imagery being projected into his visor was so bright that it was ruining his night vision, so he couldn't see very well the actual visual cues on the ground. And so he came in at a really hard angle. Instead of landing on his back wheels first, nice and gently, and then touching down with his nose wheel, this pilot kind of slammed down. Or well, let me back up just a little bit. So the pilot, when he was just like 200-300 feet off the ground, coming in final approach, was fiddling with his helmet to try to adjust the brightness level of his visor. And so he came in and he landed really hard on all three wheels simultaneously. And then when that happened, the flight control software switched modes, and then the aircraft didn't respond the way that he expected it to when he was trying to pull back on the stick and apply more throttle. The aircraft wasn't responding properly, and so it just went out of control, and the pilot ejected, and then the F-35 crashed. It was a total loss. Now, that was a problem with the helmet. There was a whole bunch of problems that went into this, but the helmet was a big one. But another big problem, and this goes back to the simulator thing. So the pilot found that the simulator training that he did not properly prepare him for what he experienced, because the simulator software and the way that the simulated F-35 performed in this did not perform the same way that the real aircraft did. And so the aircraft was not responding the way that he expected. They call this, he had negative skills transfer from the simulator. This is why it's really important for pilots to actually fly their aircraft, so they gain that feel and so they know exactly how that aircraft is going to perform, not the way that the simulator programmers think the aircraft is going to perform, but the way it actually performs. And you can only do that by flying it. And another big problem that I found really fascinating in the report is that this pilot that crashed was an instructor pilot. So he was actually supposed to be a very experienced pilot training brand new pilots, but he had only flown 8 hours. I'm going to repeat that. He had 8 total night flying hours in the F-35A. It was not just in that month, it was not just in that year, but 8 total night flying hours with the F-35. That's a big problem that is driven in large part by the excess complexity of the aircraft. And another interesting figure involved in that is that in the 30 days prior to that crash, that pilot had only flown 4 times in a month for a total of 5.9 hours. Now, most people say, the most commonly accepted standard for minimum flight hours for to make an experienced pilot is 20 hours in a month. And this pilot, who was an instructor pilot, had 5.9 hours. So that's a good way to good illustration for just how ineffective the overall program is right there. So let me talk about some of the other issues that you have to deal with if Canada decides to buy the program. Again, because the program is designed from the very beginning to be a moneymaker for Lockheed Martin, they conceived a maintenance and logistics network to support the program. Now, originally that was called the original version of it was called ALICE, the Autonomic Logistics Information System. So it was a system that was designed by Lockheed Martin. It was supposed to improve the maintenance flow. Embedded diagnostics in the aircraft were supposed to download any potential maintenance faults in the aircraft into this network, and then that was going to trigger the supply chain, like the replacement parts were going to be automatically ordered, and then the network was going to be used to be able by the maintenance crews to guide them step by step and how to resolve these issues. That was what it was supposed to do. Now, what it actually did was it didn't work very well. And instead of reducing the workload of maintenance crews, it actually increased the workload of maintenance crews because they had to work around this clunky system. Now, that system is supposed to be replaced with a new one. It goes by the name Odin, but that they're very early on in the process of replacing it. We don't have a lot of information about how the new system actually works. So other problems that we have with the F-35, the whole fleet is dealing with a shortage of engines. And that's a a multi-cause problem. And this is one of the systemic issues that we find with weapons acquisitions, is that in order to get a program approved, the Pentagon leaders and defense industry leaders will do what we call front load a program. And that's where they promise the world that whatever new system that they're talking about, in this case, the F-35 is going to have all these magical capabilities, but they're going to be able to deliver it at rock bottom price. So they make all these promises, they make people believe them, and that gets the program approved, and that actually starts the money flow. Now, after the money starts flowing and after the political engineering happens and that money starts getting spread all over the country, only then do we start to realize that the capabilities that they promised aren't really all that achievable. So those estimates start coming down, but the costs start going up. And that happened with the engine here. So when the program was sold, there were a lot of, in this case, the company that builds the engine is Pratt & Whitney, which is now a Raytheon subsidiary. They made all kinds of promises about how efficient the engine is, how reliable the engine's going to be. And so the services made plans based on those promises, not on demonstrated performance, but on those promises. And so what we're dealing with now, those engines don't work as well as they said they would, as the promises that were made back then. And they break a whole lot more often. But because the services made plans on the promises, not the demonstrated performance, they don't have the maintenance and depot capacity to fix those engines, to keep the fleet in engines. And so the most recent data point that I have on this is that in September 27th of 2021, 52 F-35s, this is American F-35s, sat idle because they did not have engines. So that's a big problem that has not been resolved yet, and it's a problem that would be inherited by Canada. Now, another big data point that tells a lot about how the F-35 performs is the number of deficiencies. Now, this is one that is whenever I talk about deficiencies, it's an issue that my critics like to latch on to, because it sounds like a big scary number. But let me put this in the proper context. So now the best data point that I have is that the number of open deficiencies, this is by the end of the fiscal year 2021. So the end of September of 2021, the F-35 program was still carrying 845 uncorrected design flaws. So the Pentagon calls them deficiencies. I call them design flaws because that's a much more accurate description of them. Now, I don't highlight the number of open deficiencies just for the shock value, because that's a big number. But I do that to show exactly how much work was left over at the end of the development process for the F-35. So like all of those design flaws were things that should have been fixed by the time the system design or the development process was completed, and then the program went into initial operational test and evaluation. So that means that there's a lot of work. There's a lot of design work that's left to be done. Now, the Pentagon declared that development for the F-35 was, the initial development of the F-35 was done approximately April of 2018. And here we are in now February of 2022, and there's approximately 845 uncorrected design flaws. So that's a lot of work that was left undone as part of the original budget. Actually, the multiply revised development budget, because it went up significantly over the years. Now, all of that work still needs to be done to have a fully developed F-35. And when that work is going to be done is what they're euphemistically terming the modernization modernization phase of the F-35. But really what that is, it is extra design time to correct those design flaws, to finish the development that should have been done as part of the original development contract, but for which Lockheed Martin and all the other various stakeholders are going to get paid even more money to do the work that they should have already completed before. Now that has a big impact on cost, particularly for customers who buy aircraft, buy F-35s now before that process is complete, because all of those aircraft that are purchased before that development process is finished are going to have to go back to the manufacturer to have those design corrections retrofitted onto the aircraft, and that's an expensive process. So I'm going to use a little bit of an analogy to make that to make my point here. Imagine you need a new cell phone, and in my case, I'm a Verizon customer. Imagine needing a new cell phone and going to Verizon and paying full price for an iPhone, but when you get it, it doesn't have the actual phone app, or you can't send text messages. But you paid full price for it. Now, to get those capabilities, to make phone calls, to make text messages, you have to take the phone back to the manufacturer and then pay them to add those capabilities that should have been originally included in the phone. That's ridiculous. I can't think of any customer that would actually do something like that. But that is what we're being asked to do with the F-35. Now that leads into that's just really procurement costs. Now let's talk about the cost of ownership. Again, the F-35 is a very expensive aircraft to operate. So there's various figures floating around out there about exactly how much money per flight hour the F-35 costs. I've seen numbers as high as $45,000 American dollars an hour, and down to like 36,000 American dollars per hour. It's either way, it's a very expensive aircraft to operate. The problem is so bad that the Government Accountability Office here in the United States is saying that if the services buy F-35s in the numbers that they have planned, that the Air Force, Marine Corps, and Navy will actually not be able to afford to operate the F-35 because the cost will be $6 billion or so beyond what their projected budgets are going to be at that point when the F-35 is operating at full capacity. So the way you deal with that is you could buy fewer aircraft to keep those to rein those costs in. Now that's kind of a standard operating procedure. We saw that with a number of aircraft here, with the F-22, with the B-21 over the years. I think that will probably end up being the fate of the F-35, that we will not procure the F-35 in the numbers that were originally planned, or you just raise budgets enough to do that, which means you're going to make up that money elsewhere. So it's a big problem, because if you cut the number of aircraft, that actually increase the production cost of each one of those aircraft. But then if you keep the production cost of the aircraft down, then that means your operations and maintenance budget is going to go up to unaffordable levels later on. And again, that's an endemic problem with the program. That's one that nobody can fix. It's one that all customers of the F-35 are going to have to deal with, including our foreign customers. So it's a key piece of information that should be kept in mind as these decisions are moving forward. So I've been talking for a long time. I think I've gone over my time just a little bit. So I'm going to stop there. I think I've delivered enough bad news for the time being. And I can certainly take a drink of water here real quick. So I'm going to stop talking there, and I'm interested to field your questions.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you. That was an incredible presentation. So many details. Thank you for so generously sharing your knowledge about the F-35 with us. It's really important for all of us to understand exactly what the second most expensive procurement in Canadian history will actually be going towards, with our tax dollars. And it's incredible to know that in addition to all of the concerns that many of us have about fighter jets, period, this one, as you say, is a turkey, and one that is designed as a cash cow for Lockheed Martin. So for those of you at home, you can find out more about Dan's work and read his articles at the POGO website. That's www.pogo.org. And there's a more specific link in the chat to Dan's writings. And POGO is the Project on Government Oversight, which is a nonpartisan independent watchdog based in Washington, D.C. So thank you to those of you who have placed your questions in the chat. Our presentations have now concluded, and we're now moving on to the Q&A section of the evening. So the first question that we have is for both panelists, and it's, Canada has no nuclear bombs, but the F-35 has the capacity for nuclear warfare. Can you elaborate on this a little bit and tell us what the implications are for Canada? Tamara, maybe I'll start with you. Oh, you're still on mute.
Well, so I'm going to let Dan talk about it, because I do mention the fact that the F-35 was designed as a dual capable plane. It's really a nuclear weapons delivery system. This was planned right from its inception. I've included this information in this new report, and I rely on Dan's work for it, so I will let him explain.
So the F-35 currently does not have the capability to carry nuclear weapons, but it will. So that's part of the modernization phase now. That was supposed to be originally, a capability delivered as part of the original development, but it was they weren't able to fill that in that part of the program, and so now it's been pushed off to the modernization phase. So I'm not sure exactly when that capability is going to be delivered. They estimate that it'll be within the next 10 years or so.
Thank you, Dan. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Tamara?
Well, just to say that if you look at the U.S. nuclear defense posture review under Obama in 2010 and under Trump in 2018, it says specifically, that the F-35 will be part of the U.S. nuclear weapons architecture. And so I think Canadians really need to be concerned about the fact that that the F-35 might be carrying this new, smaller, more compact nuclear weapon called the B-6112. There was a test flight that was done with dummy B-6112s over Nevada last year, and Lockheed Martin is making the claim that it's going to be ready, sooner rather than later. To be able to, carry these nuclear weapons. But Canada is a party to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. We're supposed to be actually moving in the direction of nuclear disarmament. But with the F-35, Canadians really need to question this. And by virtue of the fact that Canada is a member of NATO, which is a nuclear armed military alliance, dominated by the United States. Most of our NATO allies, have bought the F-35s. We really have to question the direction of this particular fighter jet and the use of nuclear weapons.
Thank you. The next question is from Bisandu. How has Trudeau explained the increase in the number of jets from Harper? Is this linked to the NAFTA negotiations? Just trying to figure out why he backed out of his campaign promise. So I think this is a very Canadian question, so I'm going to direct this towards you, Tamara.
Well, just really quickly, I am speculating that the reason why Trudeau wants 88 fighter jets when Harper only wanted 65 is because of what Dan was just talking about, was because of the fact that the F-35 is so highly flawed. You know, there's supply chain issues where the the plane is struggling to get the parts it's needed. There are so many times where the F-35, is on the ground, not able to fly. And so I think that they're hedging here, and they're realizing that they're going to need more. But I do think that with enough public pressure, we can delay this purchase again. It was because of Canadians rising up, asking questions, pushing back, that Harper had to put the fighter jet procurement on hold. He couldn't sign the deal for the F-35, 6 years or 7 years ago. And the same thing could happen here. With enough public pressure, we can get this decision delayed again or canceled entirely. But our members of parliament really need to hear from us, and we need to ask, raise these questions. Exactly what Dan just presented. We need to ask our members of parliament to investigate this procurement further.
Thank you, Tamara. So, when we're sort of reading the papers, a lot of what I hear is about the Arctic and the need to defend it. So one of the questions that we have here is, could you further discuss how claims that the F-35 would be useful in defending the Arctic? I'll start with Dan. I'm not sure how much you know about our Arctic and whether the F-35 can help secure the North.
Well, so I know a lot less about the Arctic than anybody in Canada does. My experience with the Canadian Arctic is when the polar vortex draws that cold air down over my home here in Virginia. The F-35 is designed, or at least conceptually, it's supposed to be able to, to fly and intercept aircraft flying in over the pole. So, the closest approach from Russia is over the North Pole. So I know Canada's role in NORAD is to defend that airspace, to be really that first line of defense, mostly for the United States. Whether or not the F-35 will be effective in that role, we'll only know after we get the results of the operational testing phase.
Thank you. Tamara, do you want to chime in?
I'm hoping Dan can confirm this. The F-35, compared to the other fighter jets, like the Boeing Super Hornet or like the Saab Gripen, has a very limited flying range. The F-35 can't fly as far without needing to refuel either on the air or on the ground. So this is why we're seeing these Arctic air training between Canadian and American forces now in Iqaluit, and while we'll be seeing more of this, but as Dan explained as well, the F-35 is a crash risk, and do we really want to subject our warming Arctic to crash risk fighter jets, to fossil fuel powered fighter jets, to a fighter jet that can't even really fly very far? So and do we want to be moving more fuel storage containers up in these Inuit territories to help power this fighter jet? So these are some questions that we need to think about, and we need to ask. These are the kinds of things that the federal government really should be investigating and letting the Inuit people and Canadians know these risks.
So the F-35 does have a lower range depending on its configuration. So it's sold as a stealth aircraft. For the F-35 to be a stealth aircraft, it has to be very slick. It means you can't have anything hanging off underneath it, like when you see like a fully armed CF-18, you're going to see drop tanks, you're going to see missiles, you're going to see bombs, dangling from underneath the wings. For the F-35 to be stealth, you have to have everything inside, so it has internal weapons bays and all internal fuel storage. And when it's like that, and conceivably, if the F-35 ever did need to fly like defensive missions to intercept any aircraft coming over the pole, those bomber aircraft coming over the pole would be escorted by their fighters. And for the F-35 to work as promised as a stealth fighter, it needs to be slick. So that means that it's not going to be able to get out as far as it needs to be able to do that effectively.
Thank you. We have a couple more technical questions. We have a question from Simon, who says, thank you to Tamara and Dan for the talk, depressing but informative. I've heard the F-35 is so over-engineered that it cannot really fly in the rain due to issues with the high-tech paint on the plane. Is there any actual truth to this?
Yes. You can take a look at, there was a really sensational picture that came out pretty recently of F-35 sitting on the deck of an aircraft carrier. And you can actually see the corrosion on the aircraft. So there's problems with that. The stealth coatings on these aircraft it's very delicate, and it actually takes a really long time to cure them if they ever get damaged. So that impacts readiness rates. Now, there were reports recently. For a long time, this was kind of a funny joke that we did have some fun with it, because it's the F-35's name is the F-35 Lightning II. And for a very long time, the F-35 Lightning was restricted from flying within 25 miles of any kind of electrical storm, because the inert gas generator, it's the system that pumps nitrogen into the empty spaces of the fuel tank to make them less combustible, couldn't handle the whole the capacity that it needed. So there was a risk that if the F-35 was struck by lightning, that the fuel vapors would explode and cause a big problem. So there was a report not too long ago that was fixed. I haven't seen any official government documents that have confirmed that. But there's definitely been weather concerns about the F-35 over the years.
So I don't know if this is related to the Arctic question, but there's a quick question in the chat about whether or not the F-35 can fly at minus 50 degrees C. It's cold country.
Right. I know there have been some tests, like cold weather tests in Alaska. I'm remiss, I did not look up those figures to find out exactly what temperature those were held. It's a pretty big oversight since I'm talking to Canadians. I really should have looked that one up. But I know there have been tests. I know that it has operated in cold weather in the past, but I don't know that I've seen any reports about the overall effectiveness of those tests. That's all part of the initial operational test and evaluation. Because they haven't completed that process yet, I haven't had a chance to read they haven't written the report, so I haven't read the report yet. So we'll know more about that eventually, but we don't know when that process is going to be done, and certainly don't know when that report is going to be written.
And can I just add really quickly here that Canada's current fleet of CF-18s have two engines, so it makes it safer for them to operate in the Arctic, where there's very few runways or things like this. Whereas the F-35 is a single engine. It's a Pratt & Whitney engine, as Dan said, that is a very problematic engine. So Canada is potentially buying an extremely risky, very costly, very carbon intensive fighter jet. It is not going to be capable to to so-called defend the Arctic. And then, I see that the time is ending. I also do want to tell everybody on the call as well that Canada's former defense minister, Deputy Defense Minister Charles Nixon, a few years ago wrote an article saying that Canada doesn't need a new fleet of fighter jets, period. He said, we don't need them to protect our security or our sovereignty, to protect the Arctic. The security challenges that we're facing in the 21st century are around climate change, the pandemic, poverty, etc. So we really need to rethink this procurement.
Thank you. Yes, we are coming close to the end of our time. I think I'm only going to take one or two more questions from the Q&A here, if our panelists are able to stay on. So this question is from Neil, who says, thanks for this amazing work. The report looks awesome. Can you say a little bit more about greenwashing alibis that we hear from state military actors who frame procurement in terms of environmental sustainability, or jargon about decarbonized operations or net zero force projection? I'm going to start with you, Tamara.
So we haven't seen any plans for the Canadian military to offset the emissions from its current fleet of CF-18s, and there isn't any evidence that's public about the federal government being concerned about the carbon emissions of a new fleet of fighter jets. But as I explained in the report, one long range flight of a fighter jet is equivalent to the emissions of a car, of a passenger vehicle, over the course of a year. These fighter jets are extremely carbon intensive. Canada is simply not going to be able to meet its Paris Agreement targets to decarbonize by 2030, to meet net zero by 2050, because we've got no plan in place, to offset these emissions. And in the federal government, it's the military that's the largest consumer of fossil fuels and the largest emitter of greenhouse gases. And in fact, the military accounts for 61% of all federal government emissions, and plus it has a huge budget. So we really have to to question this carbon intensive procurement, and and ask the government to tell us what are going to be the climate impacts of them.
Thank you. And this set of questions is really it's a group of questions which is all about kind of like the cost of this and whether or not we can get out of it. Last year, Canada paid $71 million in July to stay in the deal with Lockheed Martin. What will the payment be for 2022? And when is it due? And then someone else asks, how much money has Canada contributed so far? And then someone else asks here, can we get out of the deal?
Well, just very quickly, we have spent since about 1997, almost $1 billion. Annual contributions that we've made have totaled almost $1 billion for the F-35 development program. And, this is more than the federal government has spent in the same amount of time on the Department of Women and Gender Equality. And effectively what the Canadian government is doing is subsidizing, with this money, is subsidizing Canadian companies to be able to sell their components to participate in the development consortium. So there's about 100 Canadian companies that supposedly that are manufacturing little parts and components for the F-35, and in order for them to be able to engage in these contracts, Canada has to keep making these payments. Anything is possible. We can say no. It will be very difficult for us to say no to new fighter jets, because the United States, has such a great influence on our defense policies. But with enough public pressure, we can get the federal government, to continue to delay this. to stop it and or to continue to delay this, like we've already done for the past decade.
I think that's a pretty good note on which to end. I'm so grateful to you, Tamara and Dan, for just taking the time to be here with us and to share all of this very important information. It's been a great event. It's been a great evening. Thank you so much for this lively discussion. To the audience, I would say, please consider taking the action and signing the petition that you've heard about from Tamara tonight. It's in the chat. If you like events like these, please do consider making a donation to the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute at foreignpolicy.ca/donation. And I encourage everyone to visit the No Fighter Jets campaign page at nofighterjets.ca. So thanks again to our co-hosting organization, WILPF, and to you, our audience, for joining us and for your excellent questions. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get to all of them. But thank you so much for your participation. And that's it for our event this evening. Good night, everyone, and peace. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tamara. Good night.